Good morning.
Hi. So, trying to check the animation file. Would you like to disconnect the audio? I would like really loud.
Oh, I was before going to bed. I actually was looking at the no, I'm just joking.
Yeah, I would still like to shower.
Yes. If it's too much stress, don't sweat it. I mean,
No, I won't.
looks
Open
like a
more.
friendly crowd. Okay, so LGBT.
Oh, my computer also knows it's
Cannot. Yeah, Monday morning.
morning.
You know what? Don't sweat it. It'll be fine. I have assigned you as a co-host. Can you share screen?
I'm sorry?
I assigned you as a co-host.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So could you share screen?
Yeah.
I just want to check the build on the thing. Because Anthony's doing that. Okay, right, good. We trimmed it way down. We'll see.
Perfect.
Okay. All right.
Lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
All right.
So should I stay muted?
Yes, yes, with my. Okay. Maybe you can mention the presenter should be in microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, there or here. So mention about the content because I will record in this. Okay. Why my cannot works? Have you tried this? Yeah. So maybe you'll be there, so the presenter will be there. Yeah. Okay.
Any chords so we can.
Yeah, I
Good. I stretch my toes on the stretch just to make it. If I start going like this, ignore. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Gosh, you're all so chatty for 8 a.m. on a Monday. That's fantastic. Welcome to Media and the Family Environment. My name is Brad Bond. I will be chairing this session, and I'm very excited to share these 5 lovely papers with you all. The first of which is Mutual Socialization During Media Moments. LGBTQ teens and their parents negotiate identity support. Wanted to clarify that we're not joined by just those in the room, but by a regional ICA hub in Manipal, India, which is incredibly exciting. And we also wanted to make sure, again, that we had consent to record the presentation.
Absolutely.
That's good. Wonderful.
Brad, do we still have 12 minutes then?
This meeting is being recorded.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Welcome everyone. So I'm Liz. Anthony is here. We're going to do this cool tag team. Anthony's got permission to cut me off in 5 minutes, and Brad, we've got the man in power here. He's our third author. Alright, Brad already needs some help. Just, how do I change this slide? Oh, here we go.
Use those.
Alright, so part of the impetus for this paper came from an early study that came out in 2014 by Lici in Italy, and he asked this question that I found incredibly moving and poignant, asking what it means for the closeted LGBT viewer to have this queer media moment, or queer TV moment as he called it, where you would be watching something unfold on TV that spoke to your identity, that others may not know that spoke to your identity, and kind of how you would navigate that moment. That really spoke to me about this question about LGBTQ teens, the parents, the family members, media, these moments, possibilities of queer TV moments, and this question of who is expert in this identity, who is learning, and what is at stake, which seemed tremendously important. So the framework, and I know that you can't read this, but I want to put it up there anyway to sort of acknowledge what I think of as the sort of beautiful work that's done in this question of family navigations. This work by Kaczynski and colleagues arguing that we should think about these moments where parents and children are not simply in this hierarchy that parents hold all the power and children have less power, but rather they're locked in this lifelong normative commitment, right? They'll always have this relationship that they, particularly during adolescence, they may develop different working models of the world, different understandings of identity, and then they have to together negotiate that. It may come in the form of conflict, it may come in the form of mutual learning, and so their emphasis is really on mutual socialization, whereas often the emphasis has been on parental socialization of children. Here it's really like this is a back and forth, where traditional power dynamics are somewhat altered by the fact that we expect to be in this relationship forever, right? But I think that it's really important to note that this is more complicated for LGBTQ teens. So some of these assumptions and arguments that Kaczynski was making about this being a lifelong commitment, about co-negotiation, is really interesting because unlike other identities, like race, often like religion, like political background, LGBTQ identities typically are not shared between the parent and the child, and parental reactions really vary, right, to the sort of emerging understanding of their kid's identity. They vary between families in a major way. Now, I'm going to sort of hint at that briefly in this presentation, or They vary over time. Parents, like their children, go through a journey of kind of different phases of understanding, of thinking about it, reflecting on it, and so on. And it's very important to note that this lifelong normative commitment, like we are in this relationship forever, it isn't a privilege that's always afforded to LGBTQ teens. There are higher rates of homelessness among LGBTQ teens, in part because of familial rejection and hostility, and ensuing higher rates of depression and suicidality. I want to make sure that we're not sort of making it seem like, oh, LGBTQ equals depression and suicidality, but rather that stigma and bias can be really problematic, obviously. Am I making sense of that? And of course, the role of media, because we're here as media scholars, can be a source of hate, demeaning stereotypes, and inauthentic representations on the one hand, and a tremendous source of community, finding your people, affirmation, and authenticity on the other. So to examine this question, we had done an earlier paper, which I love, and then this paper, we were looking at teen-parent dyads, and so the way we did this was that we found a national polling company. They had a previously identified panel of LGBTQ teens. I have permission to work with 13 to 18-year-olds. The link went out to the teams. The language simply said, we're looking for this if this happens to speak to you and you would like to participate. If it's not relevant to you, of course, just click out. Like, they get many such opportunities. And they then would invite a parent of theirs. And so again, it was like if they were not out to their parent, obviously they did not have to participate, right? So this was entirely like we were in effect selecting a sample where the parent and the teen already had some knowledge of that identity, and the teen felt comfortable enough to have the parent participate. So the kid then solicited the parent. They had to take a selfie together to verify that they were actually co-present. They uploaded that. That was verified by the polling company. We didn't have access to it, and we had 200 dyads. Okay, and they were answering questions, and we were asking questions about perceptions of mutual mediation and these media moments. So just very briefly, parental descriptions of these media moments varies really widely. And I just sort of want to highlight that some, even though these were parents who had agreed to participate, some of them were really astonishingly negative. I mean, they were answering the questions separately, you know, and we had no back button, so you couldn't go see what the other one did. Some of them were nonetheless remarkably forthright. Some of them were incredibly loving and supportive. Team descriptions also varied really widely in terms of some describing really negative moments where they would sort of use this as diagnostics and see that it was actually going really badly, and other moments of great love and support and feeling a sense of community. What we see is that teens make more solo use of LGBT content than shared use. For parents, actually, the little that they have actually comes slightly more in these moments of shared exposure than solo exposure. Here, what we see is that both parents and teens thought that the teen was doing more mediation of LGBTQ depictions than parents were. So both were doing some mediation, but it was actually the teen who was sort of taking the lead as perceived by both. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Anthony and to talk through some of the hypotheses we were testing about the role of media moments in perceptions of identity support, how much the parent understood, loved, accepted the kid for their LGBTQ identity.
So as Louise has previewed, we are interested in this dyads between teens and parents in terms of media moments influence identity support. So what we did here is actually aggregate all the media-related variables together and determine that use of one index as media moments and conduct this actor-partner independent model. So which helps us to see to what extent actors behaviors and perceptions could influence their own perceptions, but at the same time would influence their partner's perceptions. So in this case, let's take a look at the actor effect first. So first of all, in terms of frequency of media moments, how often teens perceive they engage in such mutual socialization did not really influence their perception of identity support. However, their perception of the positivity of this media moments did influence their perception of their parents' identity support. If we take a look at the parents' actor effect, that is now the frequency, the more parents engaging will report they have experienced such mutual socialization, they reported more identity support. Of course, this can be interpreted as a reciprocal relationship as well. People who generally, the parents who have more identity support tend to engage in more media moments or such mutual socialization. And at the same time, the positivity of these media moments reported by parents has a positive relationship with identity support as well. These are all actor effects, and we also examined partner effects. That is, to what extent parents would media moments of positivity of this media moments will influence their teens' identity support. There was only one significant relationship emerged, that is, parents' perception of the positivity of this media moments influence their teens' perceived identity support. And that is the actor and partners independence model. And I will turn to Louise to share some.
Can I cut you off from the other stuff? I'm sorry if I totally screwed you up. I'm in the morning. I'm so sorry. I think I did more than my share. I'm sorry. All right, sorry. So what do we see as key takeaways? Media moments, right? And what we mean by media moments are these moments of reviewing, of discussing, of follow-up conversations after exposure, that teens often use these as, whether they're incidental, like unexpected, we just sort of come across a representation and I see how my parent responds. Teens are often seeing these as diagnoses or signals of support. So if the parent is like, ugh, or changes the channel or fast forwards or like sips their stony face, that's not a good sign that like you're going to be safe coming out, right? Or you can feel deeply hurtful. On the other hand, if the parent is warm and supportive or open or willing to discuss or uses it to initiate, it is seen as deeply affirming. And these are moments of learning, and that a lot of the learning goes from child to parent, whether it's about this is the type of representation that is authentic versus not, this is who I am, there have always been trans or non-binary individuals, this is not a new phenomenon, whatever it may be, right? There are these moments of learning, there are moments of negotiation, over religion, over identity, over what you get to say and do. There are moments of love and bonding and expressions of deep support or not. And that these are kind of really the sort of thing that Malichi identified that I think is really powerful and interesting. So we would love questions, suggestions from you, and particularly from those overseas. This work has been situated in the US, but we think it's our next step that we're looking for is to move to other contexts as well, where perceptions and responses to LGBTQ identities undoubtedly vary. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Luce. Our next presentation is Fubbing and Other Adolescent Interactions, an actor-partner interdependent approach to investigate the associations between open communication about smartphone use irritations, feeling fubbed, and relationship problems. introduce your research.
That's a quite long title, I think. But can I use the pointer or not?
Sure.
Yeah. Hopefully it works, but not that great.
So the video time presentation is 5 minutes.
Actually, the long title is about, do we need to ban our smartphone from the family context? No, I don't do. I'm going to talk about fubbing in a family context, and I think you can all imagine a situation where you and your, as a child or as a parent, were using your smartphone when you were together with the other one. And actually, maybe that's not really a problem that there is co-use of the smartphone. Maybe it's okay that you are using your smartphone while you are with the other one. And it can also be that there is fubbing, so the fact that you are ignoring the other one because you are using your smartphone. But actually, we are looking to the experience of feeling fubbed. So the fact that the other one is harmed or don't like the fact that you are using the smartphone. It's pretty normal that the smartphones are becoming a thing in our interactions. It's normal because adolescents use it to form their identity, but parents also use it because their life is busy. They have to manage a lot of different roles in their daily life, so it's quite normal that we use a smartphone. But especially the experience of feeling fucked from the other one can potentially harm our relationship quality. And relationship quality is something that's pretty crucial in our daily life, especially when it's about mothers and adolescents, because it's a quite important bond that we have beneath towards each other. So is there a detrimental influence of having in parent-adolescent diets? A lot of studies were already about fubbing in romantic diets, and a lot of that research is about looking at one perspective. But it's a bit weird to look at one perspective when we are looking to fubbing, because fubbing is initially about an interaction and it's harming an interaction. So you need to look to the two perspectives of both. And it's also proven that, for example, parents do not really know or cannot imagine what the other one is feeling, doing, or thinking about something. So we need to ask it to both perspectives. So one aim of our study was to really bring together the reports of the mother and of the adolescent. So therefore, we use a family system approach where we see really the family as a system, where the one has influence on the other, but also on the interaction between each other. And especially to analyze the data of our dyadic data collection, we will use an actor-partner interdependence model where we take into account the interdependence of a diet, so the variability between, but also within the diet. I will explain it later on, but that was our first aim. And then I'm also a person who wants to look at solutions. I'm not a person who wants to say it's a problem and it's a problem. So we were thinking about what's a solution, and maybe open communication about the fact that you have irritations can be a solution. Just saying it clearly that it's a problem or you are irritated about it. And open communication is also generally a key aspect in families, but why it can also be interesting is the fact that within the family system there are shared rules. So there can also be shared rules about smartphone use. When you say something, so when you have open communication about these smartphone use irritations, it can be that you also negotiate the shared smartphone rules. We know sometimes of each other what we want. We know moments, for example, when I am at home, I really want my parents at the table that they just keep their smartphone aside. They can scroll another moment on their Facebook feed to look silly photos. So we saw already that open communication is linked with positive outcomes in general, but potentially it can also lower the experience of feeling fed because you just make clear and you can learn from it. So in this way, we want to investigate whether it can has also reduce the negative effect of fubbing on relationship quality in a quite indirect way. So that's the model. We have three hypotheses, both on the actor and the partner level. So the actor level is about the predictors of, for example, the mother on her outcome variable. Partner level is the predictor of the mother on the, for example, on the dependent variable of the adolescent. So we have three hypotheses. The first one is about feeling fed and relationship quality. So when you feel fed, the relationship quality will be lower. Then the second hypothesis. So when there is open communication, the other will feel less fed, and then when there is open communication, relationship quality will be better. That's what we tested. And we did it via a dyadic survey. We conducted a paper and pencil dyadic survey of, so with one survey for the mother, one survey for the adolescent, and we linked it together to analyze the data. And we had 318 diets who fulfilled the three variables that we were looking at. There were also other variables, but now just for the moment, these were the interesting variables. So the mothers were on average 45 years old, and the adolescents were on average 50 years old. And we have a quite good distribution of male and female. And we were lucky. It was not that we forced it in that way, but we were really lucky there. I will explain it later, but so we have three scales. The first one was about open communication, where the one has to report about the other. It's very easy to me express all my true feelings to my mother or my child. That's an example. Then feeling fed was 5 items. My mother child glances at her smartphone when we are talking. And then the last one is relationship quality. Most of the time, my mother child is warm and loving towards me. There were 4 items. One interesting thing when you look at the descriptors, it's not idle maybe, but that one is an interesting one because here you see that the mothers reported significantly more feeling fed than the adolescent. And in the next results, this will all come together, I think. So here you have a correlation table. These are all correlated in the expected way. There's only one result. Yes, of feeling fed of the mother and open communication of the adolescent that is not correlated, and the correlations are also not too strong, so that's also interesting for us. So here you have the model. There are 2 takeaways I want to point on. So first of all, we see that feeling fed is significantly associated with relationship quality only for the mother. So only the mother's relationship quality is harmed by feeling fed. That's not the case for the adolescent. And when you bring it together with the fact that they also report significantly more feeling fed than the adolescent, you can rationalize about it. For example, it can be that they have more negative attitudes, but in another presentation in ICA, we also saw that maybe the mothers are more sensitive to experience rejection of the child, of her child, and maybe it's more normal, or the adolescent can rationalize more about why the mother is using their smartphone in front of the adolescent. So I think that's quite interesting, and it can harm, but not for everyone. And then you have the open communication finding, where you see that indeed open communication has a significant positive association with relationship quality. And the most interesting thing, according to us, is that the association is stronger than feeling threat. So maybe, and also you see that it's both for adolescents and for mothers the case. So maybe it can be a good idea to develop a tool for mothers and adolescents to foster the open communication about smartphone use irritations between mothers and adolescents. Just as there is a harming association for mothers, it's not for adolescents, but it cannot harm them to talk about it, I think. So some limitations and some recommendations for future research. We only had cross-sectional data, so we cannot say something about the causal direction of the results. And especially here, I think that social desirable answers can be very important, especially as mothers are reporting about their relationship with adolescents, for example. Fabbing has a really negative connotation. Relationship quality is also very important for mothers, so I think that can influence the results also. And then another important influence is the first lockdown period of COVID-19 in Flanders. That can also have an influence on the results when you are looking to fabbing. It can be the case that you are in more situations than normally where you are together, and then you use your smartphone also together because you have seen their face already that often. So therefore, we think that the measures can also be influenced a lot or a bit. And then recommendations for future research. I think the multi-method approach will be the best one. For example, there's a study about fluctuations in fabbing behavior on the work floor. So it can be interesting to use longitudinal data to examine the to examine that. And then contextual data, I also think that will very be contextual depending. For example, it can be a difference when the mother is using her smartphone or the adolescent is using a smartphone, when you have a really important conversation between each other at a dinner table. That will be more harming than when you are just watching a TV together and have some small talk. And then qualitative information. Also, for example, what includes good open communication about smartphone use irritations? What is it about? How do you formulate it? That it's not just judging, but really open communication. Also, in which context it can all come together in there, I think. And then another idea is to also include fathers. Fathers also have a unique bond with their adolescents, with the children. So it can also be different how they use their smartphone. It can be that maybe it can also be that their smartphone use is more rationalized as they are working or they have to do something very urgent. And also younger children. Other research of us shows that children get their smartphone at the age of 8, 9. So we just included adolescents of 12 till 18 years old, but I think that especially that young age, the just smartphone adopting child, that it can be very crucial to also investigate them because it can be very when the mother is also fubbing them, for example, and how it has influenced on their smartphone, their relationship quality, their smartphone use, but also how they learn to communicate about their smartphone use limitations. So that's a bit what was our idea. You can, that's really flashy. You can always contact me if you have questions, and we will try to publish a paper.
I think it's me next.
Yes.
We actually have to speak to the microphone so they can hear us.
It is helpful.
I'm so sorry. I was thinking, oh, I think I'm doing the TikTok, and then I was panicking. I'm so sorry.
Okay, our next paper is Does Guilt Influence the Effects of Parental Smartphone Use for Stress Coping? Results from a full experience sampling study of mothers in Germany.
Yeah. Hi. I'm really glad that so many people are up so early. So yeah, thanks for coming. Also, hello to India. Yeah, I will present my paper, our paper on parental smartphone use, and my co-authors are also sitting here, so Ruben and Sonia Utz and Daniela Becker could be here today. So I will talk about parental smartphone use and norms around parental smartphone use and the feelings of guilt. I will focus on mothers because there's been still much more time with their children, so that's why we focus on mothers. Yeah, the idea of this paper comes from more or less 3 observations. The first one is that parental smartphone use has a pretty negative image. So in 2019, this cartoon was published in Australia, where you see a mother pulling the stroller, and she's looking at her phone, and she doesn't notice that her baby has fallen out of the stroller. And the last line is that the baby wished that he was loved like the phone. And this negative image is also, you can also find it in several news articles, such as here for The Atlantic. But there's also several campaigns actually trying to encourage parents to reflect and limit their smartphone use. So the one on the left is from Germany, and they're here on this poster. Parents are asked if they have talked to their child today already. And then we have one from Switzerland and one from Canada. It's also quite international. So the second observation is that mothers themselves actually perceive their smartphones as pretty helpful tools for their everyday life. And this is particularly when you look into studies when they're actually facing a very stressful situation, because of course in the moment you find social support, you can find information, you can get a break actually by using your phone pretty easily. And the third observation is we conducted a focus group study in 2019, and there we also saw that mothers experience these negative norms pretty heavily. So they experienced that their partners, their family members, their mothers-in-law talked about them, asked them to limit their smartphone use and not use their smartphone as much. And they were actually also even asked by strangers in the bus to not use their smartphones around their children. And then we also see that mothers, parents themselves also perceive parental smartphone use also as something bad. So when they see other parents use their phone around their children, they judge that very negatively. So what do we ask ourselves is what is the impact of these negative norms? So what we first want to research is if these negative norms lead to feelings of guilt on the side of the parent when they use their phone around their children. And then we also wanted to assess. So, we look at descriptive norms. So how do mothers perceive that other mothers use their phone around their children as well? And injunctive norms, how do other people in general perceive parental smartphone use as something that's appropriate or inappropriate, negative, positive. Yes. And we expect that, of course, the more other mothers use their phones, the less guilt mothers would feel, and the more negative the perception of the societies perceive, the more they would feel guilty. And then the next question that we have was, so what is the guilt then doing, like in the next step? And here we look at stressful situations, and we looked what our outcome here is: can mothers use their phones successfully for coping with their stress? So is it actually helping them? And here we expected that when they would feel guilty about using their smartphone use, that this would interfere with coping effectiveness. Sorry. So we expected that perceived coping efficacy would go down, and also there would be less stress change. And then we also looked into long-term effects. So we expected that more guilt would relate to less role satisfaction or in the mother role, and also to less parent-child relationship quality. To study that, we did an experience sampling study with over 200 mothers in Germany. All of these had at least one child under the age of 7, so we focused on a little bit younger group than the talk before. So the design was like this. Mothers were asked to download the app Movie Sense XS on their phone, then they answered a pre-survey. And then over the course of 7 days, they answered 4 questionnaires each day that we send at predefined time points. And they will always ask about a stressful situation that had happened in the last 2 hours. And then after this 1 week period, they answered a post-survey. Overall, we have about 1,650 reported stressful situation while being with children. That's what we're interested in. And we had to, for this, limit the situation to the smartphone use situations, the stressful situation in which a phone was used and children were present. And here there are 480 phone use situations left, and overall 158 individuals. I will skip the measures. You can ask me about this later. But I think what's important is to see on what level we measured what. So in the pre-survey, we ask about descriptive norms and injunctive norms. So this is on the individual level. And then on the situational level, so in each questionnaire, we ask about feelings of guilt around smartphone use, and we ask also about perceived coping efficacy and stress change. So we ask at the beginning of the questionnaire, how stressed did you feel during the situation? Then we ask in the end, how stressed did you feel after the situation had ended? And then we calculate a difference score. So these are the short-term effects. And long-term, we ask them the post-survey about role satisfaction and parent-child relationship quality. So this is again on the individual level. And to be able to look at the effects on the long-term, we then had to aggregate the situational data. So this is then mean guilt or feelings of guilt around smartphone use for one individual. All right, so how do norms impact guilt? So yes, this is not the whole table, but I think it's, you can see it better like that. So what you see here is that descriptive norms did not impact feelings of guilt on the situational level, but injunctive norms did. So the more mothers perceive that others see parental smartphone use as something that's negative or inappropriate, the more they also perceive on the situational level, the more they felt guilty around their own smartphone use. And then how did guilt impact coping efficacy? Here you see that we indeed see that guilt around smartphone use is negatively associated with perceived coping efficacy, but it's not associated to stress change. So we only partly can confirm this hypothesis. And then how is this on the long term? Here we see again only partially that we find what we expected. So we see that the more mothers on average felt guilty around their smartphone use, the less they were satisfied with their mother role, but we do not see any relationship with parent-child relationship quality. So overall, what we can see is that mothers who think that others judge as parent smartphone use something that's negative, they experience more guilt. We also see that the feelings of guilt around parental smartphone use or maternal smartphone use seems to be related to some negative effects for mothers, but we do not see that for all outcomes. What I expect actually is that we might have curvilinear relationships here, but we do not have enough data to actually test that. So guilt, as you all know, is also a mechanism where you actually can regulate your own behavior. So a little bit of guilt might help, because we learned that also, having an impact can actually be, current smartphone use can also have a negative impact maybe. So a little bit of guilt might help, but having too much guilt might interfere with the benefits we actually get from iPhone use. So that's what I would expect, and also would like to investigate further in the future. And I want to end, or I have some limitations on the next slide, but what I also want to discuss about is that I think we need to think about these campaigns and if they're actually appropriate and if they're not too strong in wording, because what we do not want to do is put more stress and guilt into families, right? So I think we need to reflect upon this a little bit. All right, some limitations, just quickly. I have a well-educated sample, so this is not reflecting the overall society, which is for guilt, I think important because guilt, the feeling of maternal guilt was associated to white middle-class women quite a lot. So here I think we should really try to also look into other parts of the society. The sample size is a little bit of an issue, especially on the situational level, because we had to focus on these very specific kind of situations. We didn't have a large sample there. And while experience sampling studies are great to really be close to the situations, you still have then on the experience sampling level a cross-sectional survey, so we cannot say anything really about the society. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Our next presentation is Daniel Tigermont, investigating pro-social television as a parenting intervention.
All right, thank you everybody. Also for being here at 8 a.m. This is the most people I've ever seen at an 8 a.m. panel that I've been to. So I'm going to tell you about a project that I did early-ish in the pandemic when it was clear that I wasn't going to be able to work with kids for some amount of time, so I decided to work with parents instead. It grew out of some previous studies I had done on children's learning from science television, where I had found that when parents watch these shows with their kids, what's this going on? So, okay. They often learn new science information that they didn't know before. And so I was interested in this idea that when parents watch these programs, they might glean something from them of value that we would be interested in as researchers. And I wanted to look at that in some different contexts here. And so in preparing for that, I had started observing a lot of these blog posts that parents had been writing about Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood in particular, saying that, oh wow, this isn't a kid show, it's a parenting show disguised as a kid show. And I learned so much about like how to interact with my kid and about kids' behaviors and how I can sort of manage my kids' behaviors from watching this program. And their kids respond very well to it also. So I was interested in whether we could sort of quantify this in some way, of actually demonstrating this in some sort of study. And I had great ideas of a study to do, and it's a total disaster, so I'll tell you about it. So in preparing to do the study, I was looking through the literature on parental interventions that people have used to try and improve parents' relationship with their kids and their ability to manage their kids' behavior. And I came across this measure that had been used often in these intervention studies of following parents over time. And it was this measure where it basically asks, like, here are various behaviors that your kid might engage in. How confident are you that you can manage these behaviors? And I basically looked at this measure and I said, this is interesting because a lot of these behaviors that are mentioned on this measure are directly dealt with in Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood episodes. So, for example, getting upset with your, well, I'll give you some examples. So I first looked at some Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood episodes to try and see, could I find an episode that matched with each of these 20 behaviors that were on this measure? I couldn't, but I could find one that matched for 10 of the behaviors. So I was interested in whether or not parents watching these episodes might modify their perceptions of these behaviors in some way. If you have not watched a lot of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood as I have, y'all kind of talk me through some of the episodes here. So there's one episode where Daniel Tiger needs to learn to calm down when he's mad, and so his parents teach them this song. Anybody know this one?
Oh my God.
How's it go? When you feel so mad and you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4.
That's not happier then.
It's a little bit, yes. And so Daniel Tiger learns to count to 4. In another one, Daniel Tiger learns that he needs to try foods. And this was my partner very annoyed with me every time I was making dinner. You gotta try new foods because they might taste good. Beautiful. All right, so I was finding episodes that matched with 10 of these behaviors, couldn't find some for the other 10. But I was wondering whether or not parents watching these episodes glean not the lesson itself, but might feel more comfortable managing these behaviors in their own children after they've watched the episode. So I kind of designed an overly complicated study. So parents were randomized into 1 of 3 experiments that were run simultaneously. So it was an online experimental study. My overall big picture intent was to eventually do a longitudinal study where I was like showing parents all 10 of these episodes over some amount of weeks. But I first wanted to just see, like, do they respond to these episodes when they just watch one clip and I asked them about that particular behavior. So to prepare for that, 1 of 3 experiments, the bigger issue was that I wasn't sure like that you can do an ANOVA with 10 groups, and so because I had 10 different episodes, and so I wanted to kind of simplify the ANOVAs I would have to do by randomizing parents into 1 of 3 studies instead. So there was kind of 3 studies run simultaneously. There were 10 different episodes of Daniel Tiger, 4 episodes in the first study, 3 episodes in the second study, 3 episodes in the third study, and 4 behaviors in the first study, 3 behaviors in the second study, 3 behaviors in the third study. Can answer that questions later if you need more clarity there. But anyway, randomized to 1 of 3 experiments, and then they were basically watching 1 clip of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood about different kinds of behaviors. And then after they watched that clip, they were then told to imagine your child engaging in these different behaviors. How comfortable would you feel managing that behavior? Would you be annoyed by that behavior? Would you feel that behavior is a problem for you? And these were drawn from previous literature on parents managing their kids' behaviors and what sort of variables do they deem important. So relatively straightforward in terms of the questions we were asking, but kind of complicated on the design end. And we recruited in total 680 parents that were randomized into those 3 different studies, so about 200-ish parents in each of those studies. So if you have questions, I can answer them later. But what did we find? I've sort of previewed, and again, they were just answering the questions about the behaviors in their assigned studies. So 4 in study 1, 3 in study 2, 3 in study 3. All right, so did watching Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood impact parental self-efficacy? So did watching Daniel Tiger learn about eating new foods make you feel that you were more prepared to handle your child needing to eat new foods? No, not at all. 10 episodes, 10 behaviors, nothing. All right, so did watching Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood impact how annoyed parents would feel with those behaviors? So if your kid isn't trying new foods, did watching that episode make you feel more basically nice towards your kid about not wanting to eat those foods? And the answer is no, not at all. So 10 episodes, 10 behaviors, nothing. And so then finally, did watching Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood impact parents' tendency to problematize those behaviors? So watching the episode, again, make you more lenient and view those behaviors as less problematic if your child was engaging in them? The answer is not really, but we did find that parents who watched the Daniel Gets Mad episode, so the first one I previewed, were more likely to view temper tantrums as a problem, which is sort of counter to what I was expecting. I would think they would view it as less of a problem. And parents who watched the episode Good Morning Daniel viewed taking too long to get dressed in the morning as a problem. So to the degree that something was happening, it was counter to what I was predicting. But again, we did 10 episodes, and this is kind of 2 effects that were emerging in 10 episodes. So I'm hesitant to really read into that too much, but counter to what I was expecting at least. So overall, it doesn't seem that brief exposure to Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood impacts what parents' view of their children's, again, hypothetical behavior. So they were imagining their child engaging in these behaviors, at least telling me that I shouldn't do a longitudinal study of this kind because they're not responding to it in the moment. But as I was creating this presentation, I was still very interested in this topic because it seems like something's going on because all these blog posts are being posted and sent out. And as I've talked to parents, it sort of resonates with them that like something is happening with these shows. And so there's a few comments in our open-ended sort of last, like, do you have any comments for us at the end of the study? And a lot of parents mentioned this program Bluey, which is an Australian program. That's really, really cute. And it's just kind of like parent-child relationships, everyday situations, kids and parents playing together. And I have found some Reddit posts basically of parents really praising this show, mainly for how realistic it is in its representations of parenting. Basically reminders that it's okay to not know the solution to everything that your kid encounters, but it's good to just be nice and kind of learn with them and play with them when you can. And so I'm interested in how like this kind of more realistic representation is opposed to Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is very, I would say, optimistic in its view of parenting, that you have to know the solution and you always have the right answer and you're sort of always managing your kid's behavior in an effective way. how that sort of differs from this more realistic sort of depiction. So I'm thinking of doing something with Bluey. I would love to hear thoughts about a way to do this study that would be more effective and hopefully demonstrate what quantitatively what I think is going on qualitatively in a lot of these things that I've seen out there. So thank you.
Okay. Last but certainly not least is children's digital and engagement in informational communication and entertainment activities, the role of digital skills, family, and individual characteristics.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being so much people this time of the day. My name is Davide Cino, I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Università Cattolica in Milan, and today I'm going to show you some findings of my work I've been doing with some colleagues from who are my co-authors, which are David Zacco from Masaryk University, Giovanna Mascheroni from Università Cattolica, and David Smile from Masaryk University. In our presentation, we studied basically the relationship between young people, online activities, and the role of digital skills, family, and individual characteristics. So, as we know, digital inclusion, it is not a matter of clear-cut divide, which means that being digitally included today doesn't concern only having the possibility to access devices and the internet, but it also matters what we do online, how we do it, the kind of skills we develop. So it's a very complex relationship that we have there. We also know that different activities people engage in online influence life chances to different degrees. And in this sense, it is interesting the way in which Hosper and Anon define digital engagement as the ways in which people use and participate in different internet activities, contents, and platforms. And I think different is a key word here. So children's ability to participate in different internet activities can be seen as a matter of digital inclusions according to this framework. Now, the kind of activities that kids can engage in when they go online have been conceptualized in several ways. For the purpose of this presentation and this paper, we refer to the UKids Online framework, which differentiates between educational and informational activities, such as going online to learn something new or to look for information about several topics, social online activities, such as communicating with family and friends, and entertainment activities, such as playing online games or watching videos online. There are several factors that shape the kind of engagement that children have with online activities. Age and gender are two important factors. We know that older children tend to engage in a more diverse range of online activities, and also that there are differences in the types of activities that boys and girls engage in. We know that boys are more likely to view entertainment activities online, while girls are more likely to engage in social activities. Parental mediation is another variable of importance, and that's because depending on the type of mediation style that parents use, either enabling or restrictive, kids will engage in different activities. Psychological characteristics are important variables as well. We know from previous research that children who are more vulnerable, for example, who are higher on sensation seeking or emotional problems, tend to use the internet differently. And also digital skills. Digital skills are related to differentiated use of digital media. We also know that different skills actually lead to different types of engagement in online activities. Sorry. Okay, so in this study, we wanted to look at the relationship between different dimensions of digital skills and informational communication and entertainment activities of children, because it is unclear how individual and social aspects, it is also unclear, how individual and social aspects, such as psychological characteristics, parental mediation, and the like, are related to these specific activities. So we posed three main research questions, which investigated how different dimensions of digital skills relate to different online activities, how different styles of parental mediation relate to different online activities, and how individual characteristics relate to online activities. We used a subsample of the UKids online database. Now, this database actually had over 25,000 respondents, but we focused on 9,000, almost 10,000 young people aged 11, 17 from 10 countries from the UKids Online 4 database. This sample was collected between October 2017 and April 2019. And we analyzed data using multi-group structural equation modeling. If you want to learn more about why we actually selected this sample, I will be happy to provide more information later. But let's take a look at the results. So when we look at the informational online activities, we can see that we found that psychological characteristics such as emotional symptoms and sensation seeking are both positive and significant predictors of looking for information online and engaging in information online activities. Also, enabling parental mediation is a positive and significant predictor of information online activities, which means that when parents adopt an enabling mediation styles, their kids are more likely to engage in this kind of activities. Informational digital skills, not surprisingly, are positive predictors of informational online activities, while social digital skills are negative predictors of information online activities. When it comes to control variables, we can see that we have significant predictors with respect to age, socioeconomic status, and time spent online. So older children, children from a higher socioeconomic status and who spend more time online were, however, are more likely to engage in informational online activities. With respect to social online activities, we notice that once again, psychological characteristics such as emotional symptoms and sensations seeking were actually positive and significant predictors of social activities. Enabling parental mediation was a positive and significant predictors, and interestingly, restrictive parental mediation was in turn a negative predictor. So this means that when parents adopt a restrictive mediation style, their kids tend to engage less in social online activities. With respect to digital skills, only information digital skills were a significant predictor of social online activities and not social digital skills, which is surprising. And with respect to control variables, both age, gender, socioeconomic status, and time spent online were all positive and significant predictors of engaging in social online activities. Finally, moving to entertainment online activities, we can see once again that psychological vulnerabilities such as emotional symptoms and sensation seeking were positive and significant predictors of engaging in entertainment activities. Restrictive parental mediation was a negative and significant variable with respect to engaging in this kind of activities, and also with respect to digital skills. Both informational digital skills and social digital skills were significant and positive predictors of engaging in entertainment activities. With respect to control variables, we can see that age and gender were negatively and significantly related to entertainment activities, while time spent online was positively and significantly related. So we can, from this study, we learned that different skills actually predict different types of digital engagement online, which is supported by previous literature. It is interesting to notice that informational skills are the most consistent predictors of engagement across different online activities. And while it is not surprising that children who have more informational digital skills will also engage more in informational activities, it is important to understand why informational skills also predict social and entertainment activities. Also, it is surprising that social skills were only negatively related with informational online activities, and there were no relationships with social and entertainment activities, and especially with social activities, of course, because one would expect that social skills, are related to the corresponding activities. With respect to parental mediation, it was interesting to find that enabling mediation positively predicts informational and social activities, while restrictive mediation negatively predicts social and entertainment activities, which may speak for some sort of normative parenting styles. Also, children from a higher socioeconomic status use the internet more for informational and educational purposes, while and less for entertainment and playful reasons. So this may be understood in terms of a symbolic indulgence / deprivation, in the sense that maybe parents from a higher socioeconomic status may want their kids to engage in more capital enhancing activities, in a sense. It is also remarkable that emotional symptoms significantly predicted all kinds of activities, especially informational activities, which may be due to the fact that among our items we had looking for health information online, which may suggest that more vulnerable children may go online to look for information about their status. But it also poses questions in terms of the quality of contents that they find when they go online. And the same applies for sensation seeking. There are, of course, limitations to the studies. First of all, the cross-sectional nature, of our research do not allow us to deduce any causal relationship between our variables, but future research could explore the relationship between, for example, parental mediation, online activities, and digital skills to see how they interrelate, and, for example, to see whether more restrictions lead to less digital skills and thus lower engagement, or children who are less skilled are in fact more restricted because they have less skills, so their parents want to protect them more. We have also only focus on 2 types of skills with 2 items each. Further research should opt, of course, for a more range and differentiated approach. We're actually doing that with Y skills, so it is important to emphasize that this was a first step in the Y skill project, where we did a secondary data analysis of previous database in order to inform the development of a new digital skill scale and to, overcome limitations of previous research that were done with respect to UKids Online, but also other projects. But this is also something that other researchers may want to look at if they are interested in the topic. In terms of implications, our results support that the relationship between social and digital inclusion is actually bidirectional. And while we cannot explain why those children who score higher in informational skills also tend to benefit more of social and entertainment activities, this is something to keep in mind for educationalists and practitioners in order to promote these skills, because apparently they do something important for kids. And it is also important not to overlook individual characteristics such as psychological traits and overall well-being, because as we saw, these are relevant variables that may have an influence in the kind of activities that children engage in online. That was it. Thank you so much for your attention.
After 5 presentations, we do have time for questions. I would simply ask the presenters to stand near a mic and repeat the question before you answer, so that the folks can they may also hear that.
So right there.
If you'd like.
So this is a question for Lara. It was a great, very interesting study. I want to know, how do you define stressful situations and the sort of different levels that you define?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. So we defined it very broad. So we asked parents to also indicate if they only experience a small stressful situation, and we defined it in the so overall there's a theoretical definition, but in terms of how we actually explain this to parents, we said everything that make you feel a little bit stressed will be included.
Can I follow? So the deep learning, I can imagine there are much more stressful situations down when the child fell and is bleeding versus oh my gosh, we're late. Was there any way that you measured the intensity difference?
So yeah, we asked about how stressed like how stressed they felt, and we also wanted some variance there. So that's why we also said like please always the small and the big ones. Yeah, but I think we actually captured a lot of low intensity situations where it's just something small. Yeah, we need to go, and not something.
I have a question. I loved your study about fubbing. And I think I was wondering whether you had any. I mean, let me say first of all, it makes a lot of developmental sense to me that the kids are ready for independence and in fact want to use their phones to connect with peers, and so the more parents use it, the more in effect they see permission granting for them to use it. And that parents, on the other hand, being a parent, are still trying to hold on. I was wondering whether you mentioned that you want to do policy work. I wondered whether you had any comments at all in there, or parents discussing it. And a related phenomenon that I initially actually, because I didn't understand the term fubbing very well initially, was also when you send a text to your kid, do they answer? And vice versa. And I don't know what the term is for that, but like in a way text snubbing, and these kinds of push-pulls in this relationship, and yeah, there's mutual love, but at some moments one member of the dyad is interested in more distance than the other.
I think it's a good question. I think the idea of autonomy is a very crucial part in the whole story about this fubbing in the relationship between adolescents and mothers, especially as it can be an act of the adolescent of claiming their autonomy, showing off their autonomy, showing that they have others to interact with than the mother. And that's also why I mentioned the interesting age group of 9 to 12, because that autonomy relationship can be different than with the 12 to 18s. The act of answering to each other, that can also be another form of autonomy claiming, just reading the mother's answer and not reacting.
I don't know, that's you.
Yeah, I think so, but I'm not an expert in it. But I think it can be very interesting to, that's why I mentioned qualitative research, and also why I mentioned the open communication act, because the open communication can be very different of an adolescent or as a mother. I think it will be more, when I'm looking at the situation from the child perspective, as being a child of someone, not being a mother yet, hopefully. So
You would know.
For those like me. But I think the reaction of open communication, the act of open communication can be very different. And I think that what a mother sees as open communication is not what an adolescent sees as open communication. I think that the open communication of a mother can be quite hard, quite judgy, and that is not what the adolescent wants as open communication. So therefore, I think therefore I also struggle with the term of open communication. I think that the adolescent and mother interpret it in a different way. So therefore, I want qualitative research to investigate what open communication is like, and what's a good consensus of open communication for the mother and the adolescent, so that they find each other in a totally fulfilling way.
Yeah. Because open communication can also come across as bratty communication.
Yeah.
Like, oh, my kid's being direct, they're being totally.
So therefore, I also struggle with the term itself.
Yeah.
question from last presentation. So you said you had multiple comparisons. Did you find any differences between the countries you looked at for you?
Sorry?
Did you find any differences for the countries you looked at? Because you said you had multi-group comparison in different countries. Did you look at differences between these countries?
So we actually didn't run a comparison across countries in this specific case. We looked more at the overall picture, but we did exclude some countries from the analysis with respect to the overall sample we had, because they had, for example, a sample of kids with kids as young as 9 in some countries, and also the typology of data gathering was different. So in order to avoid systemic differentiation between the database, the data sets we did, we put together those countries who were more similar in terms of data collection.
Question for the Daniel Tiger study. You measured whether the problem saw behavior as a problem or not. I was curious if you measured like the degree to which they saw that as a problem, or if it was nominal, just yes or no.
So prior to them watching the episode, we asked them for all 10 behaviors that we were investigating across the studies, like, is your kid currently struggling with this on a, I think, 0 to 3 scale? And so we did look at that as a moderator to see if their kid currently isn't trying new foods, did watching this episode have a particular effect for you?
Right.
And there was nothing.
So that like when you asked them afterwards, hey, is throwing a tantrum a problem? Like, was that just like a yes or no question, or on a scale of 1
For
to
the
10?
problematizing measure, it was just yes, no, and that was pulled from, I forget the name of the measure now, but that's a typical kind of measure that's used to see like how much are their kids kind of struggling with certain things. And, it's not beautiful, obviously, but yes.
I'm just thinking, because like if you were to ask me if my kid throwing a tantrum is a problem, I'd say yeah, it's a problem that it happens, but at the same time, like how much of a problem is it to me? It's like 1 or 2, like it's normal for them.
Yeah.
So that might help kind of find the differences that you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I thought one of the measures, because we were pulling them from different ways that it's been assessed in prior research, and I was like, maybe one of these will pan out, and none of them panned out. So now I'm just kind of like lost for what to do, and I'm just thinking, as not a parent, but I am not in the head of a parent to like understand like what that particular program might do. I mean, I think what's potentially happening is that kids respond really well to it, and so like parents will use those strategies because they know their kid understands them, and it's like a good way to sort of manage the behavior in the moment. But it doesn't really seem to be changing the parents' perception of like that behavior, or they would kind of use that strategy without the song anyway, like, hey, don't hit your friends, like that's not good. And the song is like an effective way to communicate that lesson, but they would sort of give the same lesson either way. And yeah, so I don't know.
I mean, maybe it has effects, but not necessarily ones that they can immediately access right up, right? So, I mean, in the study that we did where we were looking retrospectively, a lot of parents described, in fact, Daniel Tiger was the most referenced show, when we'd say, has media done something good? I mean, they would often refer to Daniel Tiger and the songs as helping them get through crises, right? The kid freaked out in the candy aisle, and I used that song, whatever. So I'm just wondering whether, in fact, parents do make use of it, and in fact, your mini intervention may even have been useful. It's just that they're not necessarily aware that that's going to come up and be useful in that way.
Yeah, like it's too quick. So yeah, it makes me want to do like the bigger study, but then I'm also like, is that like?
Yeah. Good.
So another follow-up for that. Sorry. I was wondering, did you, when you surveyed the parents, did you ask them before also what their parenting style was, or their approach? Because I could imagine that, currently there's a lot of like gentle parenting versus like the, old school parenting approaches, and I wonder if there's any variance in that sense that it could.
Yep, so we measured authoritative and authoritarian parenting with a scale that had been used, and that didn't function as a moderator, but we did find that authoritative parents, so authoritarian parents were more likely to have seen the episode previously, so we asked about prior exposure, which I thought was kind of interesting, and then authoritative parents were more likely to have used the strategies like in their everyday life, because we asked them like, have you kind of just watched this episode about the strategy? Have you ever mimicked that strategy with your own kid? But what was sort of vague about the question we asked is that it's not clear that they were like using the song like as it was worded, or if they were just like, don't hit your friends. Yeah, I've said that to my kid before. But authoritative parents were more likely to have said they've used these kinds of strategies before, which in a way makes sense because the show itself models a lot of authoritative kind of practices. But yeah, it didn't function as a moderator or anything like that.
So it is 9:15, but if you have one pressing question, I want to thank the presenters, thank all of you. As Alex said, I think this is the largest room I've seen at 8 a.m., which is maybe why you felt compelled to present or to perform for us. And also a huge thanks to Lisa, our tech squad student, because so thank you, everyone.
I will end the session. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.